Welcome to another episode of Silk and Steel podcast. I'm your host, Carl Za, and today is May 12th, 2019. I have been inside the People's Republic of China for over 1 month now. There are a lot of travel impressions I like to share with people. And today, to talk with me, we have multiple returning guests. Davide Melia coming here all the way from
Hello.
Mangsi, Yunnan. How are you, David?
I'm good. It's been humid as hell here, but yeah, all things considered, pretty good.
Has the raining season started yet?
The humidity has, but the rain really hasn't. Well, there's been a bit of rain, but not too much yet, and it hasn't started continually raining yet.
Isn't traditionally the raining season starts with the end of a water festival?
Yeah, and there has been a bit more. Like, you have to understand that when it's winter time, there's like almost no rain at all for that 4 months of the year. The really hectic rainy season here, like it's been way humid. That's one thing. But the really hectic rain really hasn't started yet. I guess a month later it'll just be raining continually for like months. But that hasn't started yet.
That's interesting because I have now I'm in my dad's hometown, Haining, Zhejiang, on the eastern Chinese coast. Over here, they have what's called 梅雨季节. Literally, I don't know what is May. It's also some kind of rainy season. It's also supposed to start in May, but on the Chinese lunar calendar. So it's actually a month later from now. And it will just basically continuous rain nonstop.
Yeah.
So it looks like I saw a map of China, like a climate map. It basically kind of shows the Chinese climate divided by region, and it seems like much of southern China, basically south of Yangtze River, is in what's called the monsoon climate. So yeah, so we are basically experiencing the same kind of cycle here.
Oh yeah.
Even though we're pretty far apart, maybe like a couple thousand kilometers, I think, at least.
Yeah. Like 2,000-3,000. This part of Yunnan also has a lot of microclimates because it's so mountainous. So it's a little bit in a sense like Papua New Guinea, that you can go like 20 minutes this way or that way, and you've got like a completely different weather pattern going on. This even happens in...
That's funny that you mentioned that. You mentioned Papua New Guinea because as I was visiting Yunnan, that's what really struck me. Because before I came, this is my first time visiting Yunnan, by the way, the province of China.
Yeah.
That's on its southwestern border near bordering Myanmar, Laos, close to Thailand, and also Vietnam.
Yeah, close to.
Yeah, and for the like a lot of Chinese people as well, their idea of Yunnan is just like this one place, right? Like really, like people don't have a concept of how big Yunnan is, and they just think, oh, like Yunnan is all together one place, like Dali, Kunming, Lijiang, Xishuangbanna, Mangsi. They're all kind of like this, this like one place lumped together. But only when you came to Yunnan, you realize how different each part of Yunnan it really is, because of the deep mountain valleys that's been cut through by some of the greatest rivers in Asia, right? You have the Yangtze, you have the Mekong, you have the Irrawaddy. It's like just like you say, it's like Papua New Guinea. There's like pockets of cultures, right? Like that can be very different from each other, even though they're physically close, as in like distance a crow fly. But because there might be a deep mountain range separating them, there might be like very little interaction between the two neighboring counties.
Even half an hour away. Say I'm here during the day. My wife is at work at the college, which is half an hour away on top of a mountain, and we'll call each other. And I'll say, "Oh, it's pissing down rain here. What's the weather like up there?" And she'll say, "Oh, it's lovely. There's no rain at all. You know, it's really nice." And this is in the college is only a little way outside of Mungsha. It's like maybe half an hour by bus, not even. It's half an hour. It would be less if it wasn't on top of a mountain. Yeah, so even such short distances.
Not just climate, but also culturally, Yunnan is so different from place to place because of its unique geography. Because like you have these different pockets of different culture that looks like they're physically close, but they're actually very far apart because of the physical features of the land that's separating them.
Look at our trip to Baoshan, or to Tengchong in Baoshan Prefecture. That Mungsha is in Dehong, which is Dian Jingpo Autonomous Prefecture, and then you go to Baoshan, where you've got your main so-called ethnic minority groups are the Lisu and the Hui people. And even though we weren't there for that long, I'm sure you saw a big difference just in the people and the local culture.
Yeah.
Even though Tengchong's only 2 hours away now.
Yep.
They're like totally different places, like almost not even in the same country,
Yeah. I mean, like that's really surprising part. And I even make the same mistake because when you talk about Mangsi, Dai, and Jinpo Autonomous Prefecture of Dehong, right? I always get it confused with Xishuang Banna because Xishuang Banna is also famous for its Dai culture, and somehow I thought, oh, Xishuang Banna and Dehong must be next to each other, but it's not true. There's not. There's not even like a direct road connecting these two. You have to go through Kunming to in the provincial capital to get to the other place. And also you keep on emphasizing, the locals using the Dehong Dai script, right? And I at first it didn't click for me. I'm like, what do you mean Dehong Dai script? Like, wouldn't they just use Dai script? And only after I come to Dehong did I realize, oh, actually, the Dehong Dai are a little bit different from the Dai language spoken in Xishuang Banna. I mean, like
there's half a dozen Dai languages, and half a different scripts.
Yeah, and it's also because like Xishuang Banna and Dehong is actually separated by some big mountains, and then the local your Dai friend, your local Dehong Dai friend, oh God, I'm gonna butcher his name. Yang
Yan.
Okay, let's call him Yang Yan. He said it's okay. We call him Yang Yan. So Yang Yan said, told me that the Dai people in Xishuang Banna is actually closer to people cross the border in Laos, whereas the people in Dehong, the Dai people in Dehong, in Mangsi and Ruili, they're closer in culture to people in the Shan state in Myanmar.
Shan state, yeah.
Yeah.
Dehong Dai people also sometimes get called Chinese Dai, which is like I mean, like there's a certain amount of both groups informing each other. Like, the Dai here and Han people have had relations for hundreds of years, but it's like the people in Dehong get called Dehong Dai and not, say, the Dai people in Xishuang Banna, which I've always found interesting. And we met some people from Xishuang Banna during Water Festival, remember? And the clothing is like still Dai, but very different to Dehong Dai people's like holiday clothing.
Yeah, we talk about this on our scooter ride through Mangsi, that even in China, right, Xishuangbanna kind of took the spotlight, right? Because
Yeah,
everybody, when people talk about Yunnan, they think of Xishuangbanna, they think about the Dai culture of Xishuangbanna. But whereas very few people know about Dehong or Mangsi. I mean, the first time I heard about Mangsi is through you.
yeah,
I literally didn't know Mangsi existed before have known you.
yeah. That was in 2000, end of 2017 when we started
Yep,
talking,
yep,
and you I think I posted some link to East is Red, and you'd said something about, oh, like I loved the scene with the women coming down from the mountain and blah blah
yes,
blah. And
yes,
I explained to you that's the first day of water festival here in Dehong, and you said,
yes,
I've never had anyone who's been able to explain that scene to me in those terms,
yep.
and you were quite surprised. And that's when we started talking about Dehong and Mengshi and so on and so forth. Like,
Yeah, I mean,
uh,
another surprising thing talking to Yang Yan is that a lot of the Dai culture associated, well, a lot of the culture associated with Dai people in China that people tend to group with Xishuangbanna actually originated in Dehong. It's like
yeah,
it's like kind of a cultural appropriation that like all the all the
between different Dai groups. Yeah,
yeah, and just because Xishuangbanna got such a big name recognition in China, and one reason for that is because um, part of it is because of recent Chinese history. We talk about this as well when we're doing our scooter ride. For example, during 1970s, 1960 and 1970s, during the Cultural Revolution, a lot of the Chinese youth got to send down to the countryside. Some of them sent to the borderlands. Many of them got sent to Xishuangbanna. One of them is my uncle from my mother's
yeah, yeah.
side, and
You said
their
about
job,
him, yeah,
yeah, basically at the time, the Chinese government realized, oh, we have a growing urban population, and we have trouble feeding them all. And at
yeah,
the time, the Cultural Revolution is really chaotic. There wasn't too much industrial activity going on in the city, so they decide the solution is sent to all the youth to the countryside where where they will work in the farms. And in the case of Xishuangbanna, they because that's one of the few places in China the climate is suitable for growing rubber. And
yeah,
Yeah, because people don't realize this, but rubber used to be a very important commodity, almost a strategic commodity, because it's used to make tires, and
yeah,
before China had to import its rubbers from places like Malaysia, right, and because after 1949 there was a virtual embargo on China. That was when it was still British Malaya, right? And then all that
yeah, yeah,
resources
Malaya.
was cut off from China, and the only place that had sizable rubber plantation at the time was on Hainan Island in China. So what they did
Yep,
was that they got these local expert on raising rubber. They took some rubber tree seedlings. So they found out that in Xishuangbanna in Yunnan has a suitable climate and soil, and they started to make these massive rubber plantations over there, and to provide the labor they sent all these Chinese urban youth, including my uncle, down there to work the land. Um, and and
yep,
and in the 1980s, after Cultural Revolution was over in 78 80s, when the Chinese government finally reversed that policy and allowed the educated youth to return to the cities.
To return, yeah.
So all these Chinese youth from inner provinces, right? They, like my uncle from Chongqing, they come back and they carry with them the stories of all these far off land. Like, so that's how Xishuangbanna became known, because all these Chinese educated youth got sent there to work their rubber plantations, and they come back and tell the wondrous stories of this magical land of Xishuangbanna, right? And and so that's how it got popularized in like the Chinese popular imagination. And
a lot of educated youth were also sent to Dehong, to places like Roy Lee. But as you say, like the rubber plantations were in Xishuangbanna. So Xishuangbanna became a lot more prominent because rubber was, as you say, so important.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And the funny thing is, I told the story to Yang Yi, your local Dai friend in Dehong. He actually told me that he corrected me that the first one to plant rubber in Yunnan was Dehong Dai people. I actually got a book on the brief history of Dehong before I left, and
at the Jade Market.
He checks out. The story is legit. There was a Dai. This was like around the end of the last Chinese imperial dynasty, the Qin dynasty, and the beginning of the Republican era. And when a lot of the borderlands are still ruled by kind of local chieftains, what's called
the Dai Tusa here.
Yeah. One of the Dehong Dai Tusi, he was like a fairly progressive person. Right? He was seeking to modernize, bring modernization to his people. And one of the things he did was traveling abroad. He went to places like British Malaya, to Singapore, and he brought back the first rubber tree seedlings, and he planted them in Dehong. But
oh wow, okay,
yeah, so that was actually the first attempt to start rubber plantation in Yunnan. But for some reason, the scale of rubber plantation just got a lot bigger in, or at least a lot more well known in Xishuangbanna. I just don't know exactly why Xishuangbanna gets all the glory, right? And then so that's what the Chinese, the most of the Han Chinese tourists would know about Yunnan. They would know Xishuangbanna. They don't know Dehong, or they don't know Mangsi. And your friend Yang Yi also told me that another reason for that is because in the 80s, because Ruili is on the border with Myanmar, right? And Ruili is part of the Dehong prefecture. The one of the other two big cities, and the Dehong government, local government, was very focused on the cross-border trade with Myanmar. But
there's a lot of monuments and stuff here, like tree, like this happened back in the 50s and stuff, that the Chinese government started to make a lot of moves towards more friendly and productive relations with Myanmar. And, say you go to Roy Lee, or you go to Wanding, or even here, there's all these monuments attesting to this thing that started in the 50s with the Chinese government. Because, as you know, from the time of Qianlong, relations between China and Myanmar were not good, like really not good.
There was actually a war fought between the Qin dynasty and Myanmar. Actually, several wars. I got the book on it. I got the book on the Qianlong's expedition against Myanmar.
Me too. Yeah.
In Chinese. Printed by the Dehong local publishing house.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I got one that Qianlong basically wanted the jade, And he was like, "Oh, it's in this place called Vientiane, this barbarian kingdom across the border where they eat horrible food and they're just not civilized and blah blah blah." And he sent like this fantastic military expedition to Vientiane, which is still basically the name of Myanmar in Chinese, and they ended up getting really badly spanked. Like this military expedition was like destroyed to a man pretty much. Qianlong had to give up on that idea
Yeah,
for a
I mean,
while.
there were several military expedition during Qianlong's time, and when I was reading into that history, that's when I realized, like, you know, at the time the frontier was really fluid, let's say dynamic,
Yeah.
because a lot
Yep.
of the things were not demarcated. It's not like today. There's a definite demarcated border, right? On this side is China, on that side is Myanmar. Back in those days, the a lot of the border zone are these like local autonomous, semi-autonomous Dai principalities, and they will
Yeah.
pledge their fealty or allegiance to to the stronger power, whoever that might be at the moment,
Yep.
right? Because and
Yep.
the Myanmar around the time of 17th and 18th century, it became like a very expansionistic and a military power in the region.
Oh
They
yeah.
they
Yeah. Like the Kingdom of Arakan got taken over by the Kingdom of Myanmar only 10 years before the British took over Myanmar. So this was going on until what, like the 19th century, 18th century, 19th
Yeah, and
century.
Myanmar will
Sorry.
the and the Kingdom of Myanmar also had many expeditions into what is now Northeast India, the region of Assam, and
Yeah.
Manipur. I mean, all these areas also populated by, now it's part of India, but back then all those other regions, Manipur and Assam, they're all populated by like Dai dominated principalities, and
Yeah.
that so Myanmar is trying to militarily dominate all these regions, including the Dai areas in Yunnan, right? That traditionally pledged their
Yeah.
fealty to the Chinese imperial court, and that's where the conflict comes.
Yeah, to the
Yeah, so
Qing.
that's where the conflict comes in, and also whereas from the Chinese perspective, the border was always a little bit fuzzy because they're the one there are parts that clearly has been pledging their loyalty to China for a long time, like Xishuangbanna, like Dehong. But then there are other parts that's kind of in the middle. It's like a lot more ambiguous because those are like a lot of the Dai principality in the Shan state. They would sometimes pledge loyalty to Myanmar, sometimes to China,
Yeah.
and from the Chinese perspective, oh, that's all Chinese, but on the ground is a lot different. And the reality was
Yeah.
Myanmar at the time was a rising military power, and like the channel was very he was full of himself because he feel like, well, I'm the sovereign of a very strong empire, but he doesn't
Yep.
realize that that does not necessarily translate into military dominance on the ground because the local yeah, because the
Everywhere.
local
Yeah.
troops from Yunnan just weren't up to the task, just weren't up to the par. They had a lot of numbers, but often the problem is the supply because as you would know, the transportation has always been difficult in Yunnan until very recent
Oh yeah.
times. you have to climb many mountains, mountain ridges, many rivers. You know, from traveling to Mangsi to Kunming used to take what, like many, like how many hours of bus ride? Like 14.
The bus ride until 2016, 2017, it was 12, 13-hour bus ride. Now it's only an 8-hour bus ride, and that's with all those ridiculous tunnels going through the mountains and stuff. Like, we went through a few of those.
I took that bus ride on my way to Kunming because I thought I wanted to experience an overnight bus ride on those sleeper bus. On the hindsight, that might not be the best choice because the bed, I shot a video of it and posted on Twitter. The sleeper bus in Yunnan is not the same as those sleeper train because the bed is just half as narrow, and so I can barely.
It's
I'm 180 centimeters and about 85 kilo. And for me, it's just a very narrow squeeze, right? And like into that space, anyone who's slightly bigger than me is gonna have trouble.
I did that for 13 hours, and I'm taller and heavier than you are. It was like sleeping on a park bench.
Yeah,
basically. I mean, I've slept on park benches before when I was younger and drunker, but nothing like that.
Not like on a rattling bus on a 14-hour ride. So anyway, so the problem with the Qianlong's expedition in Myanmar is like a lot of times the military campaign is about logistics. And the logistics to have an expedition to Myanmar is very demanding. I mean, to send supplies and grains and troops over that long distance, over many mountains and rivers. I mean, Qianlong seriously underestimated that task. And literally, one of the expedition he sent to Myanmar like ran out of supplies. They actually struck deep inside Myanmar territory. They were close to at the time the Myanmar capital, what it would be now Mandalay. Then they ran out of food. and then it was a long slog back, and the Burmese quickly followed because they sensed weakness, and eventually they caught up to retreating force and wiped it out completely. It became such a disaster because of it. So
yeah. And reading about what Qianlong actually took to Myanmar, it was a lot of crazy stuff like cannoneers, musketeers, like all these big, heavy, cumbersome, like siege pieces and shit like that, for what a lot of the times would have been jungle warfare, And just reading the equipment list, I was going, even before I heard the end game, I thought, oh, wow, those guys were fucks, like right before they started. And they're going to go do jungle warfare as if
that
they're
was a
like
problem in those days before before the internet age, right? It's really hard to get the facts on the ground to the commander. In this case, the armchair general Qianlong, right? He's literally thousands and thousands of miles away or kilometers away in Beijing, and he was and Qianlong was such a micromanager. Like, I would not want Qianlong to be my boss. I mean, he was such a micromanager. He would lay out all the details of the plan, but those plans change as soon as he hits, as soon as it hits reality, because Myanmar is just a different place from what he envisioned. But one of the reasons he did brought cannoneers and big cannons is because on one of the first initial expedition into Myanmar, they couldn't take this very strategic fortress that Myanmar built on the junction of I think it was Salween River, and they like the Myanmar, they build the Burmese build like this very sophisticated wooden barricade. The Qing army couldn't get through, so they thought, oh, if only we had cannons, right? We can smash through with the wooden pieces.
Okay.
But then by the time they brought the cannons, finally brought over there, they realized they still have problems destroying those wooden barricades, because some of their cannons would overshot, and they just had they ran into all sort of issues. I mean, like Qianlong had to execute so many of his commanding generals on the Myanmar expedition. It wasn't even funny. But yeah.
I read
anyway,
about
enough
too,
about Qianlong's expedition. It was this episode is not about him. I'm sorry, folks. We'll have to do another episode on that. But
he would be happy.
But
though.
In this days though, I mean, the infrastructure wise, it really has improved a lot, and it really improved a lot in the very recent years, because in our drive to the Myanmar border in Raili, we saw all these concrete pylons being built in the mountains, and the tunnels being dug for the new high-speed rail, right?
Well, basically, they're doing they're extending the high-speed rail right out to the edge of China, which is Raili, and the Dehong Airport is in Mengshi. It would make more sense actually to have it in Raili, but the Chinese government goes, well, right across the border, there's war, there's civil unrest, there's all this stuff going on. It's a bit safer to have our airport in Mengshi, which is a few hours away from the border. And then we can simply...
Because several years ago, there was a case where the Myanmar Air Force in in one of its expedition against the local ethnic militias in northern Myanmar, they threw a bomb accidentally into the Chinese side of the border. And that
as recently as a month ago, there was fighting between the Tatmadaw and I think it was the Kachin Independence Army in whatchamacallit. You know how Raili is halfway across the border, and the other half of the city is in Myanmar. There was actually fighting between the Tatmadaw and the KIA, like right outside that city that is bisected by the Chinese border. So, it was that close. Like, pretty much when we were there was fighting like just outside of Raili between the Myanmar army and between the KIA. Yeah, totally.
Damn.
So I think it's a good idea.
Oh, by the way, the KIA probably should think of a better acronym.
Yeah, killed in action. Yeah, very good.
Anyways, yeah, I mean, but it infrastructure wise, that's one thing I'm like really impressed on my this last visit to China, because I always hear about read in the news report about all these infrastructure China is building, but when you are actually here, you see it being built out, and you see like especially compare to the knowledge you have about what it was in the past. It's very impressive, because my parents, right, both my dad and my mom, they were posted to Kham, which is like this Tibetan region in western Sichuan, that's culturally Tibet, on the Tibetan plateau, but for various historical reasons, it was made part of Sichuan province since basically the Qing dynasty. and when my it has a very it has kind of a similar geography to some parts of Yunnan because it has this deep mountain gorges cut by river rushing out of the ravine, and then you have all these hair raising roads that make these hair raising turns in those basically on the side of the cliffs, right? And then I remember when I was 3 years old, I went with my grandma. We took a bus to see my parents, and when the bus stopped on the side of the road, I was just I was a curious child, so I climbed over to the side of the bus to pick
Oh my
some
God.
flower, and as soon as I reach out to grab the flower, I realize like half my body is hanging off the cliff, and on the cliff below, I can like it's really far way down, and I can see like deep down there's a river flowing, and you can also see like the carcasses of the cars and trucks, the wrecks of cars and trucks that had previously fallen over.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very stunning landscape, but it can be also very scary, and that's like what Yunnan was like
Yeah.
too, until very
It
very
still
recently.
is a
And
lot of places. Like that's what my trip from here to Kunming was like in the middle of 2012. That there's all these like basically what amount to dirt roads, and you look over the side, and it's maybe 500, 1,000 meters down, and every so often you see like wrecks of cars, wrecks of trucks, wrecks of buses, and it's really dark.
yeah, that's what's so impressed about what really impressed me about my China trip this time, because my last trip was
Yeah.
2010,
Wow.
right? And it's what 9 years, and every time I come back and just see such a huge improvement. And the thing you talk about, the bus to Kunming, right? I took that overnight bus to Kunming this time, and it was pretty smooth ride. Like the road were paved.
Yeah.
There were many tunnels, so it doesn't do all those crazy turn
Hairpin
around the
turns.
cliffs
Yeah.
anymore. Yeah, it just goes through
Yep.
straight through the
Yep.
mountains, and even on our travel to the border in Rayleigh, we saw that too. Like there's these like 4 kilometer, 5 kilometer, nearly 5 kilometer
Yep.
tunnels
5 kilometers.
into the mountains, and there are like many of those tunnels, and the road were
Yeah.
beautiful. The road were nicely
Yep.
paved. um I mean, and this is like really far off corner of China, right?
It's
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 like
the edge. There's no
yeah,
more. There's no
yeah.
more China beyond. Like on the
Yeah, because when we went to Rayleigh, right on the border wall between Myanmar and China, there was a stone that says, I think, 天涯地角. Literally, it means the edge of sky and earth, right? Which in Chinese term means this is it.
Yeah.
This is the end of the Chinese territory.
Yeah.
This is you fall off the edge from here.
Yeah. And then there's little kids throwing water balloons over the wall.
Yeah, all those Myanmar kids, they're just like casually sitting on the border fence with like with barbed wires, and they're just casually straddling the wall and chucking water balloons on the Chinese
Yeah.
side, including the Chinese cops.
Yeah, they were getting water bombed as well. That was pretty funny.
Yeah, well, that was on that day that it was still a water festival in
Yeah.
Myanmar, right? And we also saw these kids were just getting everybody. Like we got trapped. I mean, I got trapped inside the hair salon in Rayleigh because those girls were they had a big bucket of water out
Yeah.
front, and they were just spraying everyone. And I'm like, okay, they're probably not going to spray inside the store because the store owner will get mad at them. So I hide out there for a while, and I had to wait until they went off against some other target. Then I dashed out so not to get wet. It was fun, and then we also saw like a group of young Chinese police walking by, and we were speculating whether they will get wet,
and they got wet,
and then yeah, and then some little kids got them. And then they were they just laugh it off, and they were like, you know, you like it's not what you expect when you see cops getting.
I was thinking, you know, with the kids on top of the border wall throwing water and begging for money and all that kind of thing, I couldn't help but think for a second, what would be the reaction if it was little Mexican kids doing the same thing at the US Mexico border? Like, I don't even want to think, you know, what would happen if that was yeah, totally. Like,
yeah, and another thing is what we saw was it was pretty relaxed at the border. I mean there was a long line of people from Myanmar to come into China.
Oh yeah,
but then on the exit side, they actually have a self checkout. They have a self checkout checkpoint to allow all these people from Myanmar to return. I mean, it's like
they're not too concerned. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just check yourself out. You know.
We don't care what you might be taking away from China, just what you bring into China or whatever.
Which, you know, in some cases they're just guarding against like drug smuggling, right? Because we actually saw. I mean, it's my first time seeing like Chinese military attack helicopters patrolling the border
on the way to Roy Lee. Yeah, we got buzzed. Yeah,
mostly from you. I think that things had got a lot better in the recent years
in Roy Lee.
A lot calmer.
Well, on the Roy Lee side of the border, certainly, because you know I used to teach at Dehong Teachers College, which has students from all over Yunnan, and I had quite a few students from Roy Lee, and they used to tell me, and you know they're like, well, relatively innocent as like young Chinese students tend to be, and they were telling me, yeah, back in the day, like, drug selling and drug consumption was like pretty out in the open. That you know you would have cafes which were basically, you know, like foreigner bait, that people would go there and just sit around smoking up, and like no one gave a shit basically. And even, you know, like yaba selling, opiates like heroin, all this kind. It was all much more out in the open. And now, if you go to the right neighborhoods in Roy Lee, there's still like wall graffiti to the effect of buying heroin, buying guns, buying tracking device, like all this contraband. But it's been pushed like way underground. A lot of the gambling has gone over to the Myanmar side of the border. A lot of people who cross the border are basically, they're not going into Myanmar, they're just going across the border to get their gamble on at nighttime. And even from Roy Lee, you see fireworks going off on the Myanmar side of the border. And I asked my friend, "Oh, what are all these fireworks going off?" And they're like, "Oh, well, the gambling stalls on the Myanmar side of the border. When someone wins, they set off some fireworks to advertise their good luck, you know, and to kind of, another winner, and this encourages people to keep going, because there's like an apparent representation of their gambling success at this particular gambling stall on the Myanmar side.
It's like an advertisement.
Yeah, totally.
It's like it's advertisement.
Another winner. Yeah. And and there's a lot more. Like the jade trade is still basically, you know, it's legal in China. Even when you think about how the jade was mined, all the stuff in Myanmar. Once it crosses the border into China, it becomes a legitimate commodity, at least from the viewpoint of Chinese law. And that's jade is still a big thing, even through, I think, the jade market has been down of recent years, but the jade is still a multi-billion-dollar per year commodity, and a lot of that.
Oh yeah, because it's like culturally significant. And I remember Jim Rogers, a U.S. investor, like many years ago. I think back in 80s or 90s when he went through China, he said, like Chinese people value jade, so it's good to invest in some jade because when the Chinese get wealthy, the price of jade is going to go up.
Yeah, we talked about that before. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, he was absolutely right.
Yeah.
And there's just so much demand, and I think like the slowing down in the jade market might actually be related to kind of relative slowing down in the Chinese economy.
Yeah, exactly.
Recently,
yeah.
I don't know. You think that? Yeah,
I do.
yeah.
There's a lot. This is something I wanted to talk about, like where Chinese spending is going now. Chinese governmental spending overall is down. However, during the previous era, a lot of government money was getting thrown around on all kinds of things. Like now, infrastructure building and education, these are areas where governmental spending has not diminished. In fact, it might even be on the ups. They're still building a lot. Like a lot of new schools. This is what I see here, and other places nearby. And I kind of have to consider this as being a subset of China. Like if it's happening here, it's happening other places in China for sure.
Oh yeah, definitely. I can confirm that because now I'm on the other side of China, and one of the things I have seen in Mangshi, particularly, remember when we drove to that new socialist village, Dai village.
Yeah, of course.
So I see the same kind of investment in rural villages in eastern China as well, in Zhejiang. So now I'm in my dad's hometown, Hailin, Zhejiang, which used to be a small town outside of Hangzhou, between Hangzhou and Shanghai. But now it's really a medium-sized city, and it's really expanding very fast into the surrounding countryside. And I go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I have a friend here. He actually came through Mangshi in the late 90s, and he said Mangshi as a city, yeah, not really. Like there was a lot of villages and towns that were sort of tenuously connected by roads that weren't very good at that point, blah, blah, blah. Basically, the Mangshi Valley was a loose collection of villages and towns and farming communities. But now it really is like a big, well, it's not a big city. It's only, like 400,000 people, official people, if that. But it is a city.
It's not a big city by Chinese standard.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
In other places, it's a fair-sized city.
You saw the panorama of Mangshi from the Golden Temple, that it's basically filled up most of the valley now.
I was surprised on my plane ride to Mangshi.
Yeah.
Because before, from your description, I always picture it to be like kind of this sleepy little town, right, near the edge of the jungle. And then I look out the plane, I'm like, oh my goodness, what is this? I see like high-rise apartment buildings occupy like most of the valley.
a lot of those high-rises are very recent though. A lot of that stuff was not here when I came at the end of 2011. And there's more and more of that stuff. I'm like the Peacock Lake development, which we saw a little bit of. That was only finalized in 2016. Some of my colleagues were talking about they were going to get houses or apartments out there. And a lot of
Wait, is that the abandoned real estate amusement park, or is that something
no,
else?
Peacock Lake. So say, the direction we came to go to the Golden Temple. If you keep going in that
Yeah.
direction, it's Peacock Lake. Peacock Lake is on the other side of Golden Temple, and that's that real estate development out there is the Peacock Lake real estate development.
Oh, it's over the hill.
Yeah, it's over the hill, exactly. But that's just one of many, It's one of many.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, like what your description of Mangsi in the 90s and its development sense, there's a very striking parallel here in Eastern China.
Yeah.
My dad's hometown, Haining, when I left, was basically a larger town in a small series of smaller towns that was interconnected, interpersed with a bunch of other villages. I mean, it wasn't really a city. I remember my cousin pointing out to me like the first, like over 3-4 story tall building in town, right? Like that was in 1990. And when I returned in 20, let's see, when I returned in 2001, my first reaction was like, oh, wait a minute, this is not a small town anymore. This is like taking the shape of a city. And then my subsequent return in 2010, that's when I was like, whoa, what is that giant auditorium they're building in the middle of the city there? Oh, they told me it's a new gymnasium. I'm like, wait, why does Hailin need a big gymnasium, right? And then, but then I woke up from my hotel. I walk into the street. And I was like, what is this? This is the city. Where did all these people come from? And today in 2019, I don't even have that question anymore. I mean, it is a city. You just like, I'm not even surprised it's a city. It just is. And it's pretty well built out by now.
You've had 2 decades to come to terms with that process.
And a lot of the thing that we saw in Mangsi villages, in surrounding villages in Mangsi, is happening in the here as well, because there's 2 processes going on. One process is the city of Haining, and I'm guessing Mangsi as well. Itself is expanding, swallowing up surrounding villages. But on the other side, there's government investment into rural villages. I mean, that's very apparent to me. Especially now, I mean, Haining, because I see just like beautiful new roads. Like they even have a specially newly built bike lane in the countryside. Because I guess the local government is trying to promote ecotourism,
and also scooters are so prevalent as well, and it's better to drive a scooter in the bike lane rather than on the road with the truck.
Yes, that's actually like in Haining City, right? They have those bike lanes everywhere, right? But mostly it's taken by the scooter traffic. And that's another thing I noticed in my travel in China is that electric scooter is ubiquitous. It's everywhere. I mean, I've seen it in Mangsi firsthand, and then I didn't see it so much in Chongqing. I maybe it was banned there. I don't know. I didn't see much of scooters in Chongqing, but in Mangsi, that's when I first started noticing. And then I saw in my next stop was Kunming, right? Yep, scooters in Kunming. And then my train took me to, I took a 2-night train to 2-day, 2-night train to Yangzhou in Eastern China. There too, scooters everywhere. And now I'm in my dad's hometown in Haining, halfway between Hangzhou and Shanghai. It's just like scooter is just one of the main way for people to get around. You know, if you don't take the bus, or if you don't drive a car, you have a scooter. Like my 78-year-old uncle, he's still working, right? He's still working as a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner. And he goes to work every day riding his electric scooter. And I'm actually very impressed. I'm like, wow, you're still riding scooters at 78? He's like, I'm still limber.
I still can, so I'd like to take advantage of that.
Yeah, but there's already some kind of regulation on that. According to my auntie and uncle, I think there's a rule. They're going to put in a rule that in a couple years they're going to phase out of more powerful scooters. Like they're going to limit only the scooters you can electric scooters you can have on the road is if it has to go. It cannot exceed 20 miles per hour.
What's that in kilometers? Well, mine.
So one kilometer is like 1 mile is 1.6 kilometers. So 20 mile is like 32 kilometers per hour.
Well, mine stops getting any more rev at 50 kilometers an hour. I've tested this.
Yeah, I don't think you have to worry about it for a while because you are in Mangshi. Haining is a lot closer to Hangzhou and Shanghai, so they adopt those rules a lot quicker.
Yeah,
because like that concludes part 1 of our interview with David Melia, talking about our travel together in the southwestern Chinese province of Yunnan. Stay tuned. We're going to have part 2 of the interview next week. Meanwhile, you can follow me on Twitter, at Facebook or Instagram to follow my travels in China. My Twitter handle is Carl Za, just my name. Carl is spelled with a C, C-A-R-L, and my last name Z-H-A. That's Zebra Henry Apple. You can find me also on Facebook, again, Carl Za, or Instagram. My Instagram handle is Shaka Za, Shaka like Shaka Zulu, and Za like my last name, Zebra Henry Apple. Thank you again for listening. See you next time. Anya